This episode is sponsored by Friskies, who would like to tell your cats hi. Now, if that didn't get your cat's attention, there is one thing that always does the trick. Just pour some Friskies crunchy food in the bowl and you'll hear those paws come running. Works every time. With so many Friskies choices, you can always bring your cats running from their secret napping spots. There's always more to explore. See for yourself at friskies.com or visit your local store.
As a sports fan, I have to confess. Sometimes the game gets kind of boring. That's when I unfold my Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7 and use multi-window viewing on its large screen. Boring game? I'm checking out my fantasy baseball league at the same time. Score still 1-0? I'm replying to emails in the other window, scoring points with the boss. Semifinals finally getting exciting? I'm buying tickets to the finals and booking my flights. Can your phone do that?
The new Galaxy Z Fold 7. Get yours at Samsung.com.
Hello everyone, this is Fortune's Wheel and I'm your host Jonathan, and today we are continuing our first Patreon series called Poland Finds Its Place. I want to sincerely thank you all who are listening to this, as you've generously donated to the production of this podcast and shown that you believe in what's happening here. There are no words for my appreciation, so I'll simply offer another heartfelt thank you. So, back to our first members-only series. This is episode 4, entitled Heavy is the Crown. I hope you enjoy the show. When Mieszko II Lambert took the crown after the death of his father, there were most certainly still Poles around who remember life under the new king's father, King Bolesław the Brave, and his grandfather, the one and only Duke Mieszko I. Having no intention to overstate this, I think it's safe to say that Poland rocketed itself to the top of European politics in just 2 generations, which is just unheard of. So upon the death of King Bolesław I, Mieszko II, named of course after his legendary grandfather, had some extremely big shoes to fill. Mieszko II had very much been a part of the political workings of the Polish system for a number of years already, the young prince even joining his father on the battlefield at Bug River against his neighbors, the Kievan Rus. For this, not that anyone really doubted this was the eventuality here, but for these roles that the young Mieszko II had played in recent years, he'd earned his father's nod to succeed him to the throne. Though no one really thought it would happen so quickly after Poland declared itself its own autonomous kingdom, no longer a subservient duchy to the Western Roman Empire. The Pope would be the only figurehead higher than the Polish king in 1025, but after just a couple of months, Poland had to bury its first king and install his son. Now, we've mentioned it on the podcast before, but it's worth remembering that Mieszko II, by 1025, when he became king of Poland, had been married to Rycheza, a daughter of a Lotharingian nobleman and niece of the now deceased Emperor Otto III, and he'd been married for about 12 years or so at this point. This wasn't just any noble family he'd married into, though. This Lotharingian was a count and a chief instigator in keeping Henry II from sliding right into the emperor's crown. By marriage, after the year 1013, Mieszko II held immense influence within the imperial family and became somewhat of a right-hand man of his father's, acting as diplomat and ambassador on multiple occasions through 1025. The young man was born in the year 990. And at the time, Grandpa Mieszko was pulling Poland together and holding his own on 3 flanks against the Holy Roman Empire, the Czechs, and the Bohemians, as well as the Rus. And it's safe to say that young Mieszko II's early life would be defined by short bursts of flurry and activity in Poland, but for the most part, it might have been a somewhat peaceful and idyllic time at times, even meeting Emperor Otto III, no doubt. But of course, this doesn't last, and at 23 he was married into the imperial family, as we said. Between the ages of 23 and 35, he would be thrust into the various arenas of battle, from the gory violence of the war zone to the nauseating mundanity of the court, and he would take his place among Poland's earliest emissaries and spokesmen to the world, though not much of these details survive except where he popped up throughout all these years. However, as promising as his earliest years might have seemed to the layperson, it doesn't change the fact that this possible potential for greatness just never manifested. Make no mistake, Mieszko II Lambert's story isn't what we've seen thus far. We won't see the political cunning and shocking battlefield supremacy of Mieszko I. We won't see the sheer audacity and winning formulas of his father, Bolesław the Brave. No, this isn't one of those stories. The story will not end well for Mieszko II or for Poland. Mieszko II's role is one of remembrance for the 11th century Polish person, though. It was a reminder of how easily the great things of the past, the great accomplishments and feats and gains of our fathers and mothers, can be wiped away before we knew what even happened. Mieszko II, to be blunt, despite his years on the battlefield, at his father's side, and in foreign courts, was not a strong leader. Where King Bolesław the Brave marked the largest the Polish kingdom reached in territory, Mieszko II would oversee a marked reversal of such fortunes. But it wasn't just Mieszko's lack of leadership that caused such a rollback of fortune. According to Adam Zamoyski in his book The Polish Way, there were actually some jealous brothers waiting to pounce in the wings. It wasn't much of a secret that Mieszko II was being groomed for a couple decades to one day take his father's place as duke, and these jealous siblings were forced to sit back and watch it all. But when Dad crowned himself king, things changed. Mieszko II was instantly challenged when he took the crown by outside forces. And if there's anything we've learned about succession on the podcast so far, it's that new leaders are constantly being challenged. And not much has changed these days either, if you want to be honest. Mieszko's older brother, Bezprym, around the time Emperor Otto III came to Gniezno for a visit, was sent to Italy to become a monk, while Mieszko's little brother, Otto, spent much of his time in Germany in the years leading up to Bolesław's death. But things again changed quickly. You throw a crown in the mix, everybody wants a piece. And what happens over the next handful of years happens with lightning speed. With the young Mieszko II dealing with little pokes and prods from the Kievan Grand Prince Yaroslav in the east, still smarting over Bolesław's victory at Bug River and the land lost years earlier, as well as Conrad's posturing from Germany and the Bohemians puffing their chests. With all of that ramping up, Mieszko II chose to push southwest toward Bohemia first. Now, possibly since Bolesław became king, Bezprym and Otto had been living in Poland, so that's a possibility they were already there. But by 1030 or so, it was clear that Bezprym and Otto were getting counsel and support from Conrad II in Germany. So Mieszko II drove them out of Poland, his brothers. This allowed Mieszko to focus on those pesky Bohemians. The problem was that Mieszko wasn't experienced enough to make sure he kept one eye on his brothers at all times. Otto scurried away back to Germany while Bezprym found himself in the court of Yaroslav in Kiev. Not a good sign for Mieszko II. And by 1031, Bezprym had convinced Yaroslav to help him take the Polish throne. And before Mieszko knew it, he had an active front in front of him against the Bohemians and an invasion by the Rus to his west. Now, Mieszko's wife, Rycheza, was a native German, as I said, so he sent his wife and children, including his son Casimir, there for safekeeping. Mieszko swung around to meet his brother in the west, but I've been unable to locate sources that explain why what happened next happened. But suffice it to say, Mieszko hightailed it. But where would he go? Germany wasn't exactly friendly at the moment. Obviously, Kiev was a no-go. Why not create a cover and go to the one place where no one would expect him to go? King Mieszko II snuck away? to Bohemia. But these are the days when the historical record begins to chronicle the very first historical stirrings of the millennium-long bad blood, one could call it, between the Polish and the Czech peoples, who currently occupy the lands once called Bohemia. Zamoyski references the writings of Gallus Anonymous here when he writes, quote, "The unfortunate man was then set upon by some Bohemian knights who, according to the Polish chronicler, used by some leather thongs to crush his genitalia in such a way that he would never sire again. Although he managed to return and regain his throne, he died, that is, he as in Mieszko II, died in 1034, leaving the country divided. His son Casimir I was hardly more successful, and he too had to flee when civil war broke out." End quote. Yeah, so that was a pretty simple and sad ending to the son of Bolesław the Brave and namesake of Poland's founding father. Mieszko II Lambert was snuffed out as quickly and unceremoniously as he entered the main stage of Polish history. So the Poland of the 1030s was a bit of a mess, as we've seen, as well as a bit of a mystery. I mean, we're just going to skip over one such Piast dynasty ruler in there known as Bolesław the Forgotten. Okay, that's how bad it was. But by the year 1040, Poland was desperate for some order, for some sort of firm background. And thankfully for them, it came in the form of King Mieszko II's son, Casimir I. Now, born back in 1016, we simply know very little of Casimir's earliest life, but going off of everything else we know of the time, we can piece things together and get a roundabout idea. In all likelihood, he spent his first years in Gniezno as that was the seat of the duchy under his grandfather's rule and then the capital of the kingdom after 1025. The one notable thing about the Polish that might seem quite the anomaly, as they were just 2 generations from being known as a loose collection of Slavs occupying what amounted to a slave farm for the Rus, is that by the 1020s, educating the nobility's youth was securely a part of their culture. The Polish valued educating their young, and the new Polish monasteries were given this duty. Casimir I, son of the then king of Poland, was sent to one such monastery near Gniezno in 1026. But by 1031, things got a bit hairy around the kingdom under his father's rule. We've heard of this tumultuous period in Casimir's life already, and after a few years in Cologne in 1034 at the age of 18, well, Casimir I was fatherless. He could only watch from afar as his father's homeland, Casimir's kingdom to inherit, collapsed in utter ruin under a series of inept, short-lived rulers who oversaw secessionist movements and even anti-Christian uprisings around the land. Casimir must have been at an incredibly low point in his life, watching this all unfold from across the border, and he was powerless to affect it. One such uprising was a political one in Masovia, in east-central Poland. A local nobleman named Mieczysław carried out his intentions of creating his own Polish nation, cut from the ashes of the once great and formidable kingdom of Poland that existed just a few years earlier. And Pomerania decided to do the same, only this land reverted back to resemble what it looked like pre-Mieszko I. That is, just a series of interwoven tribes and supergroups of tribes. But there was, as we've said, religious unrest that coincided with the political uprisings in Poland throughout the 1030s. In what has come to be called the Polish pagan reaction, essentially, the peasants and commoners decided to declare their long-held intentions to refute Christianity. We've described this before, but a quick review of a very important concept we have to keep in mind when studying the Middle Ages is this. When a leader accepted Christianity, his people rarely followed suit. Accepting Christianity was very much a strategic political move, and while the royalty and nobility converted, the little people, of which I have no doubt I would have been one of them, rarely did so without one of two things. One, decades and decades of slowly changing the culture. Or two, violent crackdowns and forced conversion. In his book Mieszko II, King of Poland, 1025 to 1034, subtitled Times of Breakthrough in the History of the Polish State. Boy, that's a mouthful. Historian Gerard Labuda freely admits that the Polish pagan reaction could have started any time in the 1030s, but having studied it for as long as he had, he confidently focused on the year 1032 as the most probable start, which means that tempers had been flaring at the lowest levels of society for quite some time already. In addition, that means that Poland wasn't the strong Christian nation that they had made themselves out to be to the Holy Roman Empire and the Pope in Rome and the world in general. This year also falls within the strange period of time when Mieszko II was getting his genitals squeezed by Czech knights, and his brother Bezprym was flying the Polish national airliner nose first into the Carpathians. Seems like these anti-Christian sentiments had coalesced by 1032 and had made themselves into a concerted effort to revolt. But it wasn't for lack of trying on the part of Rome, though. According to the website meettheslavs.com, quote, many pagan holidays were replaced with Christian equivalents, and these include Wianki, the pagan celebration of the coming of warmer seasons, was replaced with St. John's Night. The Christian All Saints' Day replaced the Slavic Forefathers' Eve, a pagan holiday celebrating pagan gods and deities. And finally, the rituals dedicated to the Dark Mother Mokoj were replaced with the Christian variety called the Miracle of the Black Madonna. End quote.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
Christian integration in Poland and elsewhere was never as smooth and seamless as history books make them seem, but as it's known today, the Slavic native faith was still deeply ingrained in the culture of lowly peasants and soldiers. And again, around the year 1032, it boiled up and over, while Poland was in steady decline. These rebellions were, of course, quelled, but very few records exist with any details as to how they were quelled. My guess, it wasn't pretty. Probably pretty bloody, which, if true, further destabilized the young kingdom. Make no mistake, dynastic struggles and quarreling among the nobility is certainly a destabilizing feature to a state in disarray and transition. But as all-important and necessary as the nobility, even elites of today's world, let's not forget about them, as all-important and necessary as they think they are, is absolutely nothing in comparison to the movers and shakers of the economy of a community. The movers and shakers being you and me, those of us on, in the peasantry, so to speak. Had the ends of the pagan reaction in Poland been as bloody as we might expect them to have been, well, that means that regardless of what's happening up top of society, the entire economy from its foundation upward was a castle built upon sand. And therein lies the age-old issue when leaders try to smack down too hard on their constituents. The upper echelons of society are hardly the ones keeping a community on solid ground. The Piast dynasty begun under Mieszko I many decades before, arguably under his dad, but we give Mieszko I the credit, was nearly collapsing here. In fact, one might make the argument that had it not been for Casimir I, the state of Poland might have simply been, a footnote in the turn of the first millennium European history chapter of your school textbook. During the pagan reaction, during the Masovian secession, during the Pomeranian secession, during the horrendous leadership of his uncles, those with such endearing names as Bolesław the Forgotten, Casimir in the late 1030s, made a few attempts to take back the reins of his father's kingdom. Year after year after year, Casimir entered into Poland, and year after year after year, Casimir was repelled. First, he retreated back to Saxony in Germany. Then, in his sophomore run at the crown, he was forced into the hands of King Stephen I of Hungary, but was swiftly put in a Hungarian dungeon and left for dead. His mother, Richeza, didn't fare any better, spending the rest of her days as a nun until she died more than 20 years later. Now, while he was imprisoned in Hungary, though, the Bohemian Duke surprised all of Europe and rode brazenly into Poland and straight into its capital of Gniezno. He ravaged the city. There's no other way to put it. He ravaged the city. He burned as many buildings as he could in a blitzkrieg of violence. He raped the women. He enslaved and killed the children and men. He pillaged. He sacked. He brought a weakened Poland to its knees. He captured Poznan, and he blazed a trail of scorn and destruction between the Bohemian border and Gniezno. And that was just the initial invasion. From Gniezno Cathedral, he stole St. Adalbert's bones and enslaved Radim Gaudentius, the first Polish archbishop. Now, on the way home, Poland fared little better, as he took some land on his way out while ransacking Mieszko I's sacred burial site. Needless to say, this Bretislaus I, Duke of Bohemia, became the Polish public enemy number one almost overnight. But this is where Casimir overcomes some serious obstacles and becomes the boss history knows him to be. Well, so I have written here that he finagles his way out of Hungary and then goes back to Germany in the year 1039 after a year languishing in a Hungarian prison. But it's not quite that simple. See, a lot happened in Hungary and a new leader took over as king. And the Bohemians were looking at the Hungarians saying, well, you know, your last king honored our request to keep this guy in jail. But the new king was like, yeah, I'm not the last king. So he pretty much lets Casimir out of jail, just to spite the Bohemians, which I find funny. So when he gets out, Casimir hears the news of Bretislaus' treachery and immediately sets to work. Casimir needs soldiers. He needs money and resources. And Casimir, don't forget, he was single. Well, for a capable leader who sets his sight on a kingdom to overtake, bachelor status was actually an outstanding bargaining chip. From Henry III of Germany, he received soldiers in exchange for his fealty. Now, this was no trivial matter either, as this marked the official end of the Kingdom of Poland, but more on that a little bit. So having his western front secured, he looked eastward now, toward Kiev, toward the Rus. In 1040, he married the daughter of Grand Prince Vladimir the Great and sister of Grand Prince Yaroslav the Wise, the current leader. Her name was Maria Dobroniega, who was 4 years Casimir's senior. Casimir had just secured his eastern flank now. At that point, Casimir just needed a year, 1 year, and Poland was his. And he even pulled Emperor Henry III into the military engagements against his own Duchy of Bohemia, forcing the Bohemian Duke to come to the negotiation table shortly after. Casimir was given Poland back, his ancestral lands, and, as part of the arrangement, Poland, already greatly weakened and humbled, was once again a duchy within the Holy Roman Empire. Casimir, as his nickname states, restored Poland's authentic statehood and kept the polity intact. He ensured the peace remained along his southeastern Bohemian border and began a rebuilding campaign to restore, again, the economic centers of the duchy, once quite recently a thriving hub of Central European activity. Casimir moved his capital from Gniezno now to Krakow. And with a little tension still on his northern border with Pomerania, he implored Emperor Henry III to help resolve issues between Casimir and the rest of his neighbors. And by the end of the 1040s and into the 1050s, while England suffered from a near civil war between Edward and Godwin, The Pope was being imprisoned by the upstart Normans under the leadership of Drogo de Hauteville, and Duke William was ramping up tensions with Geoffrey the Hammer Martel, Casimir was actually wrapping up a series of exploits that brought Silesia back under control from the Duchy of Bohemia, the soon-to-be immeasurably important Baltic port city of Gdansk into the Polish realm, and, of course, Masovia, the Secesh state in the Polish Central Plains, brought it back into the duchy. Casimir went from an heir to the Polish crown to exile in Germany to Hungarian political prisoner to conqueror and to restorer in just about 1 decade. So maybe his conquests weren't as original as his great-grandfather's. Maybe his exploits weren't as groundbreaking as his grandfather's. But they were a serious deal better than his father's, if that's any consolation. At the end of the day, Casimir still stood out. He stood maybe above his family's heads, as he was something the family hadn't seen yet. Casimir I was Poland's restorer. He pulled the Polish state back together when all seemed to have utterly fallen apart. Poland's long history has certainly had its ups and downs, and boy oh boy would it have its downs in the coming centuries. But Casimir I was the man who kept the Polish identity around for all intents and purposes. And for that reason, we end this episode with the death of Casimir I. He died on March 19th, 1058, though his wife, Maria Dobrynega of Kiev, would live on until December of 1087. His eldest son would take his place as Duke of Poland in 1058, but it's worth mentioning that through all of those problems with southeastern neighbors, he would also leave behind a daughter who would become the first queen of a new kingdom of Bohemia. I sincerely hope you enjoyed this episode about the tumultuous 1030s and 1040s. Poland's 11th century still has so much more to offer, so I hope you stick around for a new episode each month. I currently have the Poland series slated for just a few more episodes, but that is subject to change as I continue to unearth more information. If you find these stories and this information valuable and even entertaining, please spread the word. The larger we can grow this show, the more time I can afford to put into it. In the meantime, please continue to enjoy it. You're here listening for the exact same reasons I'm here creating it: to learn, to appreciate, and to be entertained. Thanks again. Until next time.